Please be seated. So the gospel today, for whatever reason, brought to mind a story that I'm sure all of you have heard at least some version of in the past. This will probably sound familiar to some of you. Maybe it'll be new for others, and it's my gift to you to share it if you've never encountered it before. My version is in terms of seeing these four golfers at the end of a round of golf. They're sitting at the 19th hole. They're enjoying this nice frosty beverage on a hot day. And somehow, the topic of how much you should give back to God comes up. And the first golfer seems a little surprised by the topic at all. And he says, well, I tithe. I thought that's what we were supposed to do. That's what everybody does, right? The second golfer says, no. This is what you need to do. You take your putter and you draw a circle around yourself. And then you take your money, you throw it up in the air. And whatever lands inside the circle, that's what you give to God. The third golfer says, no, you've got that all wrong. You take the driver and you draw a great big circle with your driver. And then you throw the money up in the air. And whatever falls outside the circle, that's what you give to God. And the fourth guy says, Okay, what you need to do is to throw it up in the air. And whatever God wants, God keeps. So I'm sure some of you have heard a different version of that. But that's what came to mind this week. The other thing that came to mind this week is, people come over the summer to church when they could be on vacation or relaxing. And we have to deal with this parable that most of us hear and we're like, ooh, man, Jesus, what are we saying here? This is uncomfortable. But it is this parable that Jesus teaches with the man's question about his brother that spurs all this in me. This should sound a little familiar as we get into the parable. It should resonate with what we heard just a few weeks ago or a couple chapters ago in the gospel. If you remember the story of Mary and Martha. Because that teaching begins with Martha saying, Jesus, tell my sister to come help me. And today we get, Jesus, tell my brother to split the inheritance with me. And in both cases, he dodges the attempt to triangulate him into a very specific, he said, she said, this is what I want, who's right, and takes it in a slightly different direction. In today's case, clearly, Jesus, as he does sometimes in the gospel, has a sense that this man's demand for justice with his brother and the inheritance might not be worth getting into, that there is apparently something to do with greed at the base of that question. So he gives us this parable where teaching to Martha, it was the many things she gets distracted by, and with this person, it's the one thing that seems to be distracting, which is the greed at the root of the demand. And so he gives us the story of the rich man, already a rich man, who apparently has barns that are already fairly full, so much so that with the abundant harvest, a great blessing, he can't possibly store it all. So the only option he can conceive of is to tear down the little barns and build big barns so he can have it. What we hear as Jesus tells the story, what I think Jesus wants us all to hear, and those who were listening that day, and the man who asked the question, is to notice how self-centered the man in his parable is. Me, my, I. There is no sense of any cognizance of anybody else in this man's world apart from himself. And how proud he is, talks to himself and his soul in the third person, that he can eat, drink, and be merry. And of course, the outcome is the foolishness of that way of thinking because he dies. And then we hear the connection coming in from what we heard in our first reading and the psalm about the fact that we're all going to die, the wise and the foolish alike. It's all vanity. We can't take any of it with us. And it's the days that we have that are probably more valuable than the things that we try to fill them with. Now, immediately, the question I want to ask of this gospel, and I do ask it, is, well, Jesus, does this mean that it's never a good idea to save for the future or to put away something so that we can take care of ourselves? Because if so, I'm in trouble. I just wrote the other day about how we should all have supplies in our homes to manage disaster and storms and things like that so we can care for ourselves and we don't all find ourselves in need at the same time. We should have food and water and supplies for 2 weeks to be able to manage different emergencies according to the Red Cross. Is this parable saying the Red Cross is wrong and that would be bad? Or does it mean I have to get rid of my pension or my Vanguard account from my old 401k, which I'm counting on for the future? It's not a great big barn. I'm not yet kicking up my feet and saying I'm going to eat, drink, and be merry, but I'm hoping that it will help me at some point. I don't think that's what Jesus means, that we shouldn't ever save, that we shouldn't make some plans to care for ourselves and be prepared for the future. But as he gives this parable, it's clear that it is the self-centered, the selfish, self-referencing view of what we have in this world that is the danger, that is the worry. So it doesn't mean that being rich towards God and having nice things in this life are mutually exclusive. It's just, is this side over here distracting us from being rich towards God? And if it is, then we have to pause for a second and make sure we don't take the path of the foolish. So the other thing to remember when Jesus is telling a parable like this is some of us might hear it and say, I don't grow any crops. I have nothing to worry about. I don't have any grain to store. I'm fine. And we don't even want to stop just saying the modern equivalent is money. This is all about money and how much is in our savings accounts and our IRAs and how much we have in the market. And it's not just that. We can apply this parable and its metaphor to any number of things that we are blessed with in abundance, that we either try to hold on to for ourselves, to be self-referential in how we deal with them, or to build walls and fences and barns to take care of what we know we have without any concern for the other. And it's not always going to be just money or grain. Clearly, the first two lessons today, paired with this gospel, also tell us that we should probably be thinking of our time and our days on this earth as somehow related. God blesses us with who knows how many days. It's different for all of us. At what point do we just relax and slide into that final chapter versus being able to continually think about others and how we can bless them with the abundance of our time or our resources or our gifts and our talents and things like that? You can think of it in some of the things that we currently seem to be discussing with each other and trying to figure out in the 21st century about our common life as American people. We are proud to be a people that enjoy freedom. We're learning that that means slightly different things to different people. That's okay. It always has. But the question that Jesus might ask of us is, say, great, I'm not suggesting people shouldn't have freedom if others in the world don't have freedom. But the question you ask yourselves is, what are you doing with the freedom that you have? Are you trying to store it and contain it just for yourself so that you can go into the future as long as possible and pat yourself on the back and relax and eat, drink, and be merry? Or are you pausing long enough to think about others who don't have what you have, to say, is there a way to share some of that with them? You can drill down even further to some of the rights that people have fought for over decades, rights that aren't equally distributed or enforced, and some of the recession of those rights, and say, okay, I'm benefiting really well from the system we inhabit. I'm just going to kick back and let other people take care of themselves. If we are self-referential only and self-centered about these things, and we don't stop to say, I'm blessed by these, is there anybody else that might not be that I could assist with what I have? I think we're wandering into the danger of the warning of the foolish path that Jesus is trying to warn us of. We could talk about it in terms of education. We could talk about it in terms of networks and how it is that people get ahead and get jobs and get contracts and all sorts of things. We can go on and on. We can talk about the fact that some of us are blessed to not have to worry about how we pay for a doctor's visit, when others have to choose to hope for the best that they'll get better, because if they go to the doctor, they can't pay their rent, or they end up in debt, or who knows what else. You can think about this in so many contexts that are not different than what Jesus intends in this parable, which is to say, if you are blessed with an abundance and you don't give any thought to anybody else, you may be surprised that you're on the foolish path. And for some of us, the equivalent of building our barns is nothing more than simply enjoying the status quo. especially when the status quo benefits us. If things are pretty good for me, I'm good. I feel bad for folks over here who don't have it as good, but I'm cool. I'm good with the way it is. And that, again, if it puts us even subconsciously, not actively working against people, but not working for them, we're on that line where I think Jesus is saying, you need to pay attention here. Being rich towards God, as we hear in the gospel today, does not see the opposite, the other side of the coin, as not having or going without. It doesn't mean you can be rich towards God and be poor, or you can be rich towards yourself and have no relationship with God. That's not what it means. The opposite of being rich towards God is being greedy and selfish. And there's a lot of ground in between those two realities that we have to figure out. It would be nice if we could each line up and ask Jesus our question, or tell Jesus what we want. Jesus, tell these people to share what they have. Clearly, Jesus isn't going to do that. And that's why this isn't about a lot of the isms that we put in place when people start debating how we should interact with each other as people. This is not Jesus suggesting, as we might be tempted elsewhere in scriptures to say, well, Jesus is basically socialist, or he believes in communism. That's not what this is about. Jesus' economy, God's economy, is not the kind of things that humans try to do to figure it out. You can't force the issue on people. Jesus is not going to tell anybody exactly what they're supposed to do to and for another. Not going to help Martha, not going to help the rich man by answering their question. Not going to hand us a chart that says, here's you, here's God. Oh, that's what you're supposed to do right there. Instead, he teaches these parables that are open-ended to get us to think and to realize that we have some discernment to do. We have some action that is ours that we need to own and to be part of that process. It's the question that the Gospels ask again and again, especially Luke's Gospel. I don't have a dollar figure. I don't have a percentage. The question for you to answer, people, how much is enough? And that's a variable answer that we all have to wrestle with. We might also start asking, do we trust in God's abundance? And to what extent do we trust in God's abundance? Planning is not always a bad thing. Joseph, if you remember from Hebrew scriptures, he got where he needed to be in life because he helped Pharaoh realize there were going to be good years and lean years, and to save up during the good years so they could weather the famine in the lean years. And it saved the people, and it saved the Pharaoh, and it saved Joseph and his family, and was a big part of the story of God's people. It's not as though we can't save for ourselves and our families and to make sure that we have, but to ask, what are we doing with God's abundance? And how much is enough? We are fortunate to be blessed, all of us in this room, in so many ways. And we all know that there are others who are not as blessed as we are in all the ways that we are. And there's some prayer and some discernment and some questions to be answered there. But if the questions we want to ask are, how big do we draw the circles? Where do we draw them? What's in, what's out? Who's in, who's out? Or if our mindset is to build bigger barns to contain what keeps us secure, or allow other people to build bigger barns that we just happen to benefit from to keep us secure, and we never think of who might not have access to what's in those barns, I think we're asking the wrong questions. And they're not the questions that Jesus wants us to be asking. Jesus does not want us to be the people on the foolish path, which again is not the path that has nice things on it. It's the path that's selfish and self-centered and self-referencing above all else. It's not about lines. It's not about circles. It's not about barns. It's about what do we do and how do we do it with the blessing of God's abundance.